7 o'clock, Your Worship.
Good evening, everybody. I'll bring this regular council meeting to order on Monday, March the 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. and to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Stahelis. And the next order of business, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to number 2. Do you have any late items?
Late items this evening.
Thank you. We'll move on to approval of the agenda then, please.
Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Nobody? Thank you. Next order of business.
Yes, we'll move on to number 4, adoption of council minutes. We have the regular council meeting minutes of February 22nd, 2022 here for adoption.
Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Vital, second by Councillor Palmer. Any errors or omissions? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Anybody? No. Thank you. Next order of business.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 5, any business arising from the minutes?
Business from councillors arising from the minutes. Being none, we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 6, consent agenda. We have 3 items, bylaws. We have waste collection and disposal amendment bylaw number 1176, 2022. We have bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw number 1177, 2022. And single-use plastic items bylaw number 1178, 2022. All here for adoption, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Piper, seconded by Councillor Vidal. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Anybody? No. Motion passes. Next order of business. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 7, delegations and petitions. This evening we have BC Transit presenting Adriana McMullen, and this is regarding the Chilliwack and Fraser Valley Regional District Transit Future Action Plan.
It's all yours, folks. Good evening, Adriana.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. Let's see if I can make this a share. Are you able to see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, great. Well, with that, I will begin. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'm delighted to be here this evening to share the priorities from the Chapter 7 section of the Transit Future Action Plan. So just a brief overview, we will review the purpose of the Transit Future Action Plan, give you some context, provide an overview of the engagement that went into this, as well as some of the market considerations, and then provide information around the rural targets that we have placed in this plan. And then we'll end on an overview of the transit service proposals. And then following that, I will flip it over to my colleague, Rob, who will speak to you about some really exciting new initiatives that we have coming up around the corner. So the Transit Future Action Plan is a long-term strategic decision, or pardon me, long-term strategic plan, and it's intended to be the subsequent document following on the 2012 Transit Future Plan that was put together. And what this enables is it enables identification of the priorities that we as BC Transit and our local partners will be working towards in the coming years, and what priorities there are to improve the transit system. In the future, 5 to 8 years from now, there will be another subsequent update of the strategic plan. This is a strategic plan. It's kind of like an official community plan. It sets out the high-level goals, and the actual growth and changes in your system will be determined through regular 3-year expansion agreements that are signed between BC Transit and the Fraser Valley Regional District or the City of Chilliwack. So the purpose of the Transit Future Action Plan, as I mentioned, was an update or a new version of the Transit Future Plan. We are carrying forward many of the same goals from that 2012 plan. However, this new plan does distinguish between transit service types, which is a change from the previous plan. And I think it recognizes much more clearly the difference in the types of communities that the service in your rider's guide covers. It also provides an update of transit mode share targets and provides some improvements and work we can make things we can look forward to implementing on the infrastructure side over the next 1 to 5 years. And then lastly, with the pandemic behind us, our added goal is to start rebuilding and recovering ridership. Today, we are focusing on Chapter 7, which is paratransit. And paratransit is the smaller service that connects rural areas to their next biggest city or center or to one another, just at a high level. And we are doing this presentation for the different municipalities that have paratransit service in the Chilliwack and Fraser Valley area in the eastern end of the valley. So in terms of the context, I wanted to provide you a snapshot of what's been happening since the 2012 plan was provided. This chart shows years from 2010 to 2019. That's each of those bar columns. And then you can see the 2012 is noted there when the Transit Future Plan was adopted. And from 2012 to 2019, there was a doubling of ridership in the service area. And this includes the conventional rides in the Chilliwack system, the paratransit rides, so the Agassiz Harrison route, which is your Route 11, the Hope Paratransit, and then also the FVX connector, the Fraser Valley Express connector that was initiated in 2015. One of the other pieces I would like to point out is that in the same time as your ridership doubled, you also kept up and maintained investments in the system. The hours of service that were on the road also doubled in that time period. And that's really excellent to see, that continued commitment and investment in the service. If we scale down and look specifically at the paratransit service, you can see here the same time period, 2010 to 2019. And I have distinguished the Hope Paratransit service, the Route 22, from the Route 11. The Route 22 is the hashed color, and the Route 11 is the solid bar graph. And you can see that, again, there was an increase in ridership, about 50% increase in ridership. So that is really good to see. And we, for areas that are rural, we don't always see these kinds of increases. And so it's really encouraging to see that the demand and the interest in using transit is there and in the community. So the service types in this Transit Future Action Plan include connectors, and that's something like the Route 66, the FVX, which goes from Chilliwack to Langley. Frequent transit, which would be a bus that goes more often, like the number 1 Vetter. Local transit, which is city local routes that connect to major centers, and then paratransit. And that's used outside of urban areas to connect rural communities to one another and their next large city. We tend to use smaller, more nimble buses that can sometimes provide limited custom service. And so that would be your Route 11 and your Route 22, which we are speaking about today. In terms of average daily ridership, you have, these figures are from 2019, 2020, prior to the pandemic. We saw good ridership for the size of the system in the routes, about 160 passengers per day on the Agassiz Harrison and close to 50 on the Hope. If you compare that to the other routes that are in the same rider's guide, you can see that it is quite favorable. You're looking somewhere between a Route 7 and a Route 4 in Chilliwack. And then also the number 22 is also ranking, in context of some of the urban routes, the bigger routes that you see in Chilliwack City. In terms of productivity, again, the productivity on the Route 11 is quite high. It's ranking with some of the urban routes in your transit service area. And then if we look at productivity versus the peers, and so by productivity, I mean how many passengers we have on the bus per hour of service provided, you can see that the Route 11, again, prior to the pandemic, was at about 8.7 rides per hour. And that ranks very, very favorably compared to similar sized transit systems in terms of how many hours of service they get. So I think the only one that exceeded you from this group was the Merit Paratransit. Similarly, the Hope Paratransit does perform quite well against its peers of similar hours. In terms of on-time performance, we like to examine this because if buses are early, that's really bad because people may miss their connection and not be able to make their journey at all. If buses are on time, we love it. If they're a little bit late, usually it's not the end of the world because the customer will be a little late to arrive at their destination. And they have a possibility of missing a connection, but they are still getting on their journey to where they're going. We do show that there was some tardiness in the Route 11, and we believe that this number is coming from some work that was done on the bridge, the Rosedale Fraser Bridge. We are not seeing, did not see an increase in customer service complaints to this. So that's quite positive. And we are getting some new technology that Rob will tell you about in his section of the presentation. And it actually will help us correlate how many people are on the bus when it's running late. So then we can understand how many passengers are actually impacted by some of this late time. In one of our other systems where they had some on-time issues, we discovered that the reason why we weren't hearing about these on-time issues is because there's very few people on the bus when they were actually happening. So again, new technology will help illuminate more of what's happening. So in terms of the engagement that we had going into this plan, we did a fair amount. Again, it was a little before the pandemic. This plan has sort of spanned a fairly broad timeline in 2018 and 2019. And what we heard on the rural side, the paratransit and the FVRD funded services is an interest in expanded service hours for Route 11 and also for Route 22, and also a strong interest in a transit service connection between Agassiz and Mission, and presumably also Harrison as part of that. In terms of the market considerations, and this was put together prior to the last census coming out, compared to some of the growth that we were seeing in Chilliwack, the Fraser Valley funded service areas, the paratransit, so the area that's covered by the Route 11 and the Route 22, had a much more stable population growth. And we also are aware that there are settlements in your area that do not have transit access and still do have a need for some basic service. And so there was also a strong interest in improving access to essential urban destinations and interregional transit. Interregional transit is that number 66 Fraser Valley Express, for instance, which goes from Chilliwack all the way out to Langley. One of the differences in this new plan, the 2021 plan from the previous plan, is that we are distinguishing our targets for the rural area apart from the targets that we have in the more urbanized areas. So the original plan had a 2% transit mode share target across the board. This plan sets a transit mode share target of the urban areas at 3%, and for the smaller rural areas, it sets it at 2%. So it maintains the target we had in 2012. I think this recognizes that, you know, the number of people we have within catchment of each bus stop is never going to be what you have in a major city. And so we want to be realistic about how the scale and the pace at which we aim to grow the service. Now, if we look at a trajectory of how many service hours we would be needing to add and how often to try and meet that mode share target, what it works out to for the Agassiz Harrison Paratransit and for the Hope Paratransit would be about 2,500 hours every 4 years. And that would be over the next 20, 25 years or so. You can see compared to the growth pace of the Chilliwack service and the Fraser Valley Express, it's much more modest. Chilliwack is looking at 4,300 hours every year. The Fraser Valley Express, 7,300 hours every 2 years. So yeah, 2,500 hours every 4 years shared across these two rural services. And you know, this is still a relatively high growth scenario in terms of what kinds of ridership we expect could happen. And the investment trajectory that we place in the document, again, is also a visionary one. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the actual growth of your system is going to be determined by these regular 3-year expansion agreements that are signed every year between BC Transit and the Fraser Valley Regional District. And those agreements, they review the ridership data and they consult with the contributing partners. And they also look at the demand factors that are changing in the different areas. So with the service proposals that we have for the paratransit routes, so the 11 and the 22 in the rural areas, have the short-term ones on the top table, and then I have some medium-term priorities in the bottom table. And you'll see that what we have first up is some hours in order to make Sunday service consistent all year and add some statutory holiday service. And then moving into the medium-term implementation, so 3 to 5 years out, some hours dedicated to later weekday service on the 11. And then the very bottom one there that says new service is a new route that would create a connection from Mission to Kent via Highway 7. And so that would be a brand new connection. We don't know what number that would be yet, but it's there. It would require some extra buses, as would some of the other expansions. And the fleet needs will be confirmed as we move into those 3-year annual agreements. In terms of the infrastructure proposals, all of the services in your rider's guide currently are operated and managed and maintained out of the Chilliwack Transit facility. And so we need to have a good facility master plan because we're starting to reach capacity there. And so working with the Chilliwack, City of Chilliwack, and then also, keeping in mind that what happens in that facility has implications for the services that are funded by the Fraser Valley. We just want to identify that. And then also possibly examining some opportunities for a satellite storage yard in the Kent area or possibly even a little further east. And that might bring some benefits for when the new North of Fraser service comes up online. So that's the one between Mission and Agassiz. And then, ongoing bus stop improvements. And yeah, that more or less wraps up my portion of the presentation. I don't know if you want to have questions now or wait until after Rob does his piece. Is there a preference?
Want to finish first?
Okay, pass it over to Rob.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Rob Ringwald, I'm the Senior Manager of Government Relations for BC Transit in the Fraser Valley. I'm glad to be here with you tonight. And yeah, I'm here to speak a little bit about NextRide. So not sure if you've heard, but we will be launching our NextRide technology in the across the Fraser Valley. That'll be the Central Fraser Valley as well as all the way out to Hope. We will be doing so about April of this year. We're just working through all the technology pieces that are involved right now. But NextRide is basically, it's a combination of automatic vehicle location technology, as well as automatic passenger counters. And this technology on the buses combined will allow us and allow our customers to be able to plan trips in real time. So basically that tech will provide bus location data to mobility providers, Google, different apps that are out there. And they'll be able to pick up those feeds on those for their apps. And a customer that now goes to a bus stop will be able to go online on their phone to either Google Transit or our endorsed app is the Transit app. And they'd be able to see from their location where the nearest bus stop is, or if they're standing at a bus stop, which buses are coming to that route and at what time. And where previously they'd have to be working off of the scheduled times in the schedule in the rider's guide, now they'll be getting live real-time updates of where their bus is. So to Adriana's earlier slide, where we showed on-time performance, if a bus is running a little bit late, the NextRide app will be able to tell them that, and they'll know not to panic that their bus is coming, or if they're standing in front of a coffee shop, maybe have time to grab a coffee before their bus arrives. So clearly a good customer service improvement for BC Transit. And another couple benefits will be, there'll actually be annunciations on the bus for all the different stops on the bus. So that'll obviously help us with any of our customers who have visual impairments. And as well, every bus will be updated with an information display screen that will also display upcoming stops and next stops. And then clearly, with all of the data that we're gathering, it's going to allow us, from a planning perspective, much more robust data on planning. We'll know which bus stops are most frequented. We'll know what routes are most frequented at what times of the day. And obviously from our operations perspective, it'll give them just a lot more visibility on what's going on the road at any one time. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, from a benefits perspective for NextRide, number one is our riders. We know if we can enhance the customer experience, that hopefully will translate into more ridership. That ridership recovery is obviously desired coming out of COVID-19. And Adriana showed some really great growth numbers there up to 2019. We know we took a bit of a hit with COVID. Those numbers are coming back, albeit slower than I think we'd all like. And NextRide technology hopefully will help support some of that ridership recovery. In terms of data intelligence, as I mentioned, all that data that we're going to be getting will now be able to fed not only into our planning departments, but also into our operations centers. So they'll have real-time visibility of what's happening on the road at any one time. And then from a partnership perspective, NextRide will allow us again to provide better information for our customers through not only Google, also other applications, and then also even with TransLink. So now someone, because TransLink also has an open feed, someone now will be able to do their trip planning from say Hope or Harrison all the way through into the TransLink system using that application. Next slide, please, Adriana. In order to facilitate this, though, the one thing that we came across was from a trip planning perspective, as you can think, software and technology doesn't like it when there's duplicate routes. And in Chilliwack and in the Fraser Valley Regional District, we have some of the same routes and numbers as we do in the Central Fraser Valley in Abbotsford and Mission. So we had to make the decision in order to ensure that it had the trip planning capabilities that we wanted. We had to make the decision to change some route numbering. So some of you may have seen some of the temporary bus stop signs that have gone up in your area, where we are changing the Chilliwack routes from the single-digit series to the 50 series, and we will be changing the number 11 Agassiz and the number 22 Hope to a 70 series, so 71 Agassiz, 72 Hope. There'll obviously be a pretty robust, we've already started our marketing and communications around that to customers. And you should start seeing some of the new flag stop signs with the new numbers on them going up in the next couple of weeks. Next slide, please. And then maybe I'll just finish off here, just talking a little bit about the FVX expansion to Lougheed SkyTrain Station. I was actually on CBC Vancouver today, speaking a little bit to this expansion. There's obviously some excitement around this expansion. And this is the Fraser Valley Express expansion that will see us extend the number 66, the Fraser Valley Express, from its current terminus at Carville's SkyTrain Station, Carville's TransLink bus station, all the way to the Lougheed SkyTrain Station. And so every single trip, we have over 19 trips a day, will be extended to Lougheed. And then we are able to add some additional Saturday trips as well. So that will go in service on March 27th. And we're pretty excited about that expansion. And I think that brings us to the end. Yeah, so thanks again for your attention and time today. And I think we'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Rob. And Adriana, thank you for your presentation. Any questions from council? For the Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, good evening, Rob. I noticed on the you've got up there at the moment, you've got tactile paving at the end of the bus build out on the curb line. Is that going to be a requirement for everybody, for all bus stops in the future?
Yeah, I'll probably, Adrian will probably have a comment to make, but what I would say is BC Transit does publish pretty robust bus stop guidelines. So we don't physically install the bus stops ourselves from BC Transit perspective, but we definitely provide the information and kind of the best practices to our local government partners when they are in building or improving bus stops. And clearly, yeah, it's very, very keen eye of you to notice that. And yeah, we'd love to see that that level of robust kind of infrastructure for all of our stops.
Yeah, I don't know if you experience it in Chilliwack or but in the major cities in Europe, they actually build the bus stop out to slow the traffic down behind them, to give the bus a clear route away. Is it something you're looking at in the future? To actually build out so as you're not obstructed by parked vehicles or other vehicles?
Adrian, you want to handle that one?
Take this one, yes. That is a very astute observation again. So BC Transit does recommend, we call them inline bus stops, where the bus will stop in its lane and the passengers will be extended out to meet that bus for our higher order services. So something like the frequent transit, the FTNs, the routes that we see operating, very frequently every 15 minutes. And that absolutely helps them stay on time because they're not waiting to get back into traffic. And it's vital to those services that have such frequency because then they don't end up bunching up. And so that's typically where we tend to prioritize those sorts of treatments. Some of our other maybe regional scale and rapid transit routes, we are starting to look into dedicated corridors like bus lanes, bus lanes is probably the easiest way to put it. Again, to maintain service on time performance. And those again would be the something like the 66 sections on the highway perhaps. But yeah, great question.
Yeah, again, bus lanes are a big thing in Europe. So many people leave their cars at home. And of course, it's great enforcement as well, because you have the bus lane enforcement cameras that catch people that are double parking in the bus lane. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors have any questions for Adriana or Rob? No? I'm glad to, thank you again for the presentation. Looking to the future, well, the close future regarding our carbon footprint, is the next few years, are you looking at changing over to electric buses from the gas ones at the moment, Adriana?
I think I'll let Rob take that one.
Yeah,
Hey,
no
Rob,
problem.
it's all yours.
That's okay. I appreciate the question. And so as Adriana had mentioned in her presentation, we are looking at the potential for a new facility in Chilliwack, probably in the next 5 to 6 years. Again, don't hold me to that number, but that's the strategic plan at this point. That really will be the gateway to allow us to look at electrification for the for Chilliwack, as well as the other Fraser Valley Regional District routes that are supported from that facility. So right now, BC Transit does have a low carbon fleet program that's aligned to the BC Clean Plan. We currently will be trying to basically electrify the majority of our fleet by 2040. So there's a lot of moving pieces behind that project, as I'm sure you can appreciate, charging being the biggest factor. So building that charging infrastructure that will allow us to electrify is really kind of the long-term planning piece that we need to plan for. The buses are there. They're starting to, from a manufacturing perspective, become more and more available. So that's really for this area. That Chilliwack facility and the upgrades and the new facility with charging infrastructure will be the real key to unlocking electric potential in this region.
Thank you very much. And the last question is that I'm glad to see that the increase for the weekends, especially in the summer, because as a resort community, it's again trying to slow up the carbon footprint. It'd be nice for the folks, visitors from other parts, whether it be from the Hope area or the Chilliwack area to come in by bus, providing the services there. And it looks like that's improving, and we appreciate that. Again, oh, sorry, Councillor Palmer.
One question, if I may. So the buses that are presently in service, the new ones that'll come on, will they have better and better access for bicycles on the front for the buses basically carry bicycles? I was thinking that anybody who's interested in using bicycles and doesn't want to ride over the Rosedale Bridge to go to Chilliwack or to go in the area, that having a bus system that would really facilitate bicyclists would be helpful. Is that going to be improved by the new buses and by the system?
So just to answer your question, Councillor, so currently all of our buses do have bike racks on the front of our buses. The light duty buses that we do deploy in your area have a maximum of 2 buses on that bike rack. I know that sounds a little bit less than we would like. The challenge with bike racks is really the safety of having more than 2 bikes on the front. It actually starts to impede the headlights of those vehicles. So I know our team, and I did see a question about wider tire bikes. So I'm pretty sure that our team has been looking at accommodating the wider tire bikes and looking at different solutions with regards to increasing bike capacity. But that is one of the challenges, is just how and where do you store those bikes, but it's definitely being looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, I know you mentioned in the future about the route going from Agassiz to Mission. Am I right to assume that that would also provide connection to the West Coast Express? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, that would be one of the key connections. And so certainly in the evening west or eastbound direction, it's a nice trip. I think we'd be likely lining up with the first West Coast Express trip heading eastbound. And then we would be seeking to try and line up with the last morning trip, which departs Mission at 7:25 right now. That would mean people leaving Agassiz or Harrison about 6 or 6:10 a.m. So it would be quite early, but that is one of the key items that we heard as a priority for that service, is not just getting people who live in the communities in the intervening area to either Kent or even on to Hope and then or to Chilliwack, but also enabling them access through the West Coast Express. The upcoming FEX expansion will also help those people using the number 11 also be able to access Metro Vancouver through the Route 66. But yes, that would be definitely part of the service design. Great question.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Adriana. Thank you both, Rob and yourself, for the great presentation this evening. My question is, what is the likelihood of coordinating shuttle service for some of our larger events in town, which are typically during the summer months?
Rob, do you want to take that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Shuttle service, again, so with your current fleet, again, what BC Transit tries to do is we try to maximize the deployment and the efficiency of the resources that we have on the road. So your current vehicle fleet is basically fully deployed at any one time. So shuttle service is a little bit challenging when we're already providing regular conventional fixed route service. Those types of things, again, if there is some consistency with or increase in frequency that we'd like to see in terms of the routes reaching different centers, then again, that's something from a planning perspective that we can take back and look for improvements to achieve those. But I would say the it's a good news, bad news story. The good news is we try to efficiently deploy our fleet as best we can. The bad news is it doesn't leave a lot of flexibility for I'm just going to use the term random, but for random type events. So when if it can be regular scheduled or at least has some consistency to it. So let's say summer times, I guess I could use the example of Cultus Lake route. If it has some consistency to it, we can look to build it into the plan. But random kind of use of the fleet is challenging for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you again, Adriana and Rob, for coming out and doing the presentation this evening. It's much appreciated, and it's, I remember the days when all we had coming into town was the Greyhound bus, and so this is a tremendous improvement for all our residents. Thank you again.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adriana.
Good night.
Next order of business, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to the next delegation that we have this evening. We have the Sergeant Mike Sargent from the AGC RCMP detachment, together with Inspector Pankratz and Superintendent Lee.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening, Your Worship, council members, and Village of Harrison staff. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this year's, or I guess last year's, 2021 Village of Harrison Hot Springs policing report. Before I jump into the report, I do want to make a couple quick introductions. I'd like to introduce Inspector Darren Pankratz. Darren is very new to us, a couple months under his belt. He is my direct supervisor. Also, Superintendent Davey Lee. Davey Lee has taken over from Brian Massey as the officer in charge of the Upper Fraser Valley Regional District. So they're here to support me, but also answer any questions you may have as well. So, without further ado, we'll jump right into this. I will say if any questions come up during the presentation, by all means, ask away. All right. So Agassiz RCMP detachment, we currently have 15 members, 6 municipal, 9 provincial. We have 2 current vacancies. We have 1 member transition in during 2021 and 1 member transitioning in this current year. We were fortunate enough to receive an increase to our provincial complement, and we've just filled it with a new recruit. So that is going to help, obviously, Harrison and the surrounding areas by increasing our number of officers that are ready to respond. And then there's your current members there. I always like to include this slide because not only does it show the size of our policing area, I do want to challenge anybody to come up with another example of a policing area that is as unique as ours. We have the large rural area, the uniqueness of having a large lake such as Harrison. We have 2 mayors and 2 councils, 3 correctional facilities, ski hill, obviously a huge tourist destination being Harrison. 5 indigenous communities and 3 major highways that are all within our policing area. The next slide, just briefly, I was hoping that this year we would have escaped COVID, but we did not. We saw the continued impacts of COVID-19, reduction in detachment services. We had to close our front counter for a little bit. Increased cost of the detachment for personal protective equipment, and also increased overtime as members were off dealing with COVID sickness. Disruption of crime prevention initiatives. Again, that was something I was hoping to kind of bolster this past year, but again, with provincial health orders, it became quite difficult to do so. We saw continued effects on the court system. Court dates being delayed, offenders being released more frequently than they would have necessarily in the past. So always recurring issues with that. And of course, COVID-19 related calls for service and having to consider public health orders in our day-to-day enforcement. All right, so we'll jump into the stats. These stats are specific to Harrison Hot Springs. We saw an increase in calls for service over last year, 2020. Very small, only about 28 calls for service. A lot of that is somewhat tied to our seasonal policing initiative, where we had more boots on the ground here, a lot more proactive files, a lot more involvement with bylaw, that type of stuff. We did see a big noticeable increase in our priority 1 calls. So our priority 1 calls are anything that requires a swift response. So it could be medical emergency, it could be a crime in progress, anything along those lines. Councillor Vidal, did you have a question? Okay. And then just in summary, we had a reduction in crimes against persons, a little bit of an increase in property crime by about 14 files, and then other criminal code, and then very few drug-related files. The next slide is a bit of a breakdown. I will say that the 20% that is reflected up there does include more than just the village. It also includes parts of Morris Valley Road, some of the Forest Service roads that go up both sides of Harrison Lake, and also anything that would have occurred on the lake itself is included in that. So that 20% is typical of what we've seen over the past couple of years. There's not much in the way of change. Further breakdown of the calls for service. So in 2020, again, we had 550 within the village of Harrison Hot Springs. That was 14% of our overall detachment call volume specific to Harrison. Of that, there were 70 property crime files, which was 13% of the total calls for service for that year. Last year, we did see that slight increase. Again, I attribute that to proactive work done by our members. Same kind of breakdown, 15% of our overall call volume, that slight increase in property crime, and I'll dig deeper into that to show you where that actually increased. And again, 20% of overall property crime files. The property crime was increased partly due to a rash of incidents that we had last January and February. We had a bunch of underground parking lots broken into. So because there was multiple vehicles within those underground parking lots, we generate a file for each one of those calls, not just one globally. So I'm happy to report this year, we did not see those issues in January and February. So we're off to a good start. And then this next slide just kind of breaks down the property crime numbers even further. So there was decreases in break and enters. There was the increase in theft from motor vehicles, which again is attributed to those early months where we had that rash of break and enters to those underground parking lots. And then mischief as well. Mischief includes vandalism, graffiti. Anytime somebody tries to break into a car but is not successful but damages the lock, they try to break into a building or a shed, same type of thing, they damage the door, that is reported as mischief. So we did see an increase in that. Some of that is attributed to people trying to enter other underground parking lots or other vehicles in Harrison during that time, during January and February. As far as property crime goes, no change to the hotspots. Obviously the businesses, parked vehicles, residential areas, namely the underground parking lots were targeted. And then being a resort area, anytime you have that influx of tourists, it means more vehicles and they become targets as well. Some of the crime trends. Property crime numbers increased slightly from the previous year. There was a slight increase in calls for service in the Harrison area. We still see spikes in activity. By that, I mean, you know, if somebody comes here to commit crime, they're not just targeting one spot, they're doing as much as they can and then leaving. This past year, we saw a huge increase in catalytic converter thefts, and I think that's going to continue because it's easy money for anybody that's doing those. We did have a couple reports within Harrison and our whole detachment area. I know Chilliwack and the whole lower mainland has seen a huge increase as well. And of course, what makes it challenging is Harrison itself has very few people that are out doing these things. It's people coming from other areas that are passing through town and taking advantage of the fact that they can come here, do what they need to, and then they're off to the next place. Violent crime. We did see increases in assaults. Everything else, for the most part, either there's no reports or very little. And then the other one that went up significantly was domestic violence. The majority of these calls, whether it's domestic violence or assaults, well over 60% of these calls are related to campgrounds and the resorts. While we did not see the property crime throughout the rest of the year, we saw an increase in regular attendance to our resort areas for domestics, cause disturbance, just basic assaults. So those numbers were quite up this year. And I attribute that to a different clientele, we'll say, in the off-peak hours. During the peak hours, these calls weren't as prevalent as some of the slower months when, we'll say, better deals were offered to entice people to come there. Some of the traffic initiatives. So we started up Speed Watch this year. It was one thing we were able to do. We got a bunch of people trained from the Harrison area. Constable Scarecrow is still out there. We were able to get, 2 years ago, we got a new laser radar from a civil forfeiture grant. Last year, we got a Black Cat traffic monitoring device, also from a civil forfeiture grant, which we put out to monitor traffic. It gives us feedback on the number of vehicles speeding in a particular area, what the ratio is, how fast they're going, and it allows us to target our enforcement to peak times to better make an impact. Also targeted enforcement, and during last school year, we actually even parked one of our spare police cars in front of the school on Hot Springs Road as a deterrent as well, and received pretty good feedback on that. So over the last few years, policing itself has started to evolve and change. So I wanted to highlight some of those new policing realities to you, just so you're aware of what changes that we're experiencing. We're experiencing a lot more time spent on administrative tasks. There's a lot more requirement for reporting on investigations, increased disclosure requirements, analysis documentation for firearms, drugs, electronics that are seized. So a lot more time and effort is put into making sure that investigations are done and that we're satisfying what Crown and the courts need to have our files go ahead. Unfortunately, that does mean a little bit more time in front of the computer doing more paperwork. We spend more time responding to medical emergencies such as overdoses. Nowhere is safe from the overdose crisis. And of course, we're being first responders, we're part of that as well. More time dedicated to mental health related matters. I do have another slide in this presentation that further expands on that. And of course, last year being what it was, a lot of assistance by our members, helping out with BC wildfires, the localized flooding and landslides as well took up a lot of our time and resources. So mental health. Again, this is a big part of our job. I know when I signed up for this job, it wasn't anywhere as prevalent as it is now. So again, it's one of those things that we take on and have to deal with. So in 2021, we responded to 177 mental health related calls for service, and then 219 the year before. These calls for service include check well-beings, dealing with persons at risk to themselves or others, drug-induced psychosis, and other mental health crises. 42 out of those 177 calls last year required members to apprehend an individual under Section 28 of the Mental Health Act and take them to the hospital. This resulted in over 100+ hours spent transporting and waiting at the hospital for an individual to be seen by a doctor. So 100+ hours of a member, sometimes two, at the hospital in Chilliwack outside our jurisdiction. So again, that's time away from other police work we could be doing. Just, I wanted to put that in there just to put it into perspective of, you know, I think it kind of paints a picture of things that we're dealing with this day and age. All right, so the next slide, there's a couple of highlights from 2021. Obviously, you know, with the signs that you've seen around the community, we were quite successful in establishing several new block watch communities within the community. I provided training to the block watch people, and also we did some building assessment for some of the specific groups. What that entailed is we attended some of the condominiums and the underground parking lot, and kind of assessed each building as to, you know, if I was a criminal, what would I be looking at? What is the easiest way for me to get into this building? Once I'm in, can I access anywhere else? So we kind of look for deficiency or weaknesses to these buildings in an attempt that the condominium residents in the strata would get together and rectify those. So we made a whole bunch of recommendations, and it seemed like most people took those to heart because we haven't had that many issues since. Obviously, a big component of our involvement in Harrison this year was the seasonal policing program. In 2020, we kind of did a little pilot project, and then with the support of yourselves, we did a fully implemented seasonal policing program. My view on it is we're very successful. I think it kept major incidents down to nothing, and we had lots of feedback, lots of visibility out there, and very positive results. And then in June, we had a break and enter to an underground parking lot. Members initiated investigation and obtained video surveillance, which is one of the things we did recommend during our assessment of some of these buildings. Through that video surveillance footage, we were able to identify, locate, and arrest 2 female prolific offenders from our area. One also had warrants for outstanding 16 previous charges. So very, very successful. I know there's a few people out there that don't believe in video surveillance, or, you know, it's worth, but a lot of the successes we do have are based on that good video. All right, so as a detachment, what are we doing? Continuing our increased patrols and presence, foot patrols, visibility, educating the community through crime prevention, ensuring our current resource levels are maintained, working with our partners, Harrison Bylaw, and Kent Harrison Search and Rescue, working with our Indigenous communities on proactive initiatives, the implementation of the situation table, which with any luck is only weeks away. It's been a long time coming, but we're almost there. Area focused seasonal policing, and then getting guns off the street. One of the things I'm most proudest about my team this year is that we took 103 guns off the streets in 2021. So as I talked about before, the seasonal policing initiative was a big step for us this year. Provided Harrison Hot Springs seasonal policing from May till right through the Labor Day weekend. We had one dedicated member working on weekends and holidays from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. This was supplemented by a full-time detachment seasonal policing member working Thursday to Sunday. So most days, especially on the weekend and holidays, there was always 2 members out there for that visibility and police presence. We provided increased police presence and visibility at peak times throughout the summer months, and this was a very successful initiative as a result of the partnership and support between the RCMP, Village of Harrison Mayor and Council, and of course the bylaw enforcement team. Within the community, again, COVID kind of put a damper on some things, but we're still able to assist with Canada Day, be there throughout the summer months. We did Stuff the Cruiser this year. We were very successful. Halloween patrols, and are looking forward to hopefully things reopening this year where we can participate in Sasquatch days, dragon boat races, all that stuff that's looming on the horizon. So, and then the last slide, I always like to throw it in because they're kind of the unsung heroes of our detachment, the victim services workers. So they deal with kind of the aftermath of our response, where they're there to support victims of crime, whether it be through court, whether it be just somebody to talk to give updates on the investigation, even just an ear to listen to them. So we have 2 dedicated people that work out of our office, Darlene and Pam. And as you can see, they're quite busy. In 2020, they had 202 files. Last year, they dropped a bit to 162, but their phones never stop ringing. And right now, they still have currently 99 active files. So that basically concludes the presentation. Like I said, myself and my support team are more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you again, Sergeant. Appreciate that. Any questions from council? Councillor Hooper, then Councillor Vidal.
Yeah, on the mental health, I understand that the Mayor from Everest, Mayor Braun, actually spoke to Fraser Health to say that he was out one evening on a Saturday, and they picked up someone with a mental health issue, took them to the hospital to find 4 out of the 11 cruisers on duty were stuck at the hospital for over 4 hours. Only to see the person released and then reoffend within an hour of going. I hope this is something that's being brought up with Fraser Health to say that maybe they need to be paying for their own police force to be there to actually take charge of these people that are obviously vulnerable people as well, for the protection of themselves and for the public. I'm all favour of CCTV. As you realise, I come from London, and Wandsworth, we got 14,000 CCTV cameras within a small area. It's a great help to you, and it's a great deterrent to other people. Also, I've noticed an increase in police activity along the freeway for speeding vehicles. If you could look at the accumulated speed cameras, takes your time of one spot, calculates it at the next, and if you've been speeding between, you get a ticket. They do it in France and in the UK, Belgium, Holland, and I think that would save your members so much time just chasing people up the freeway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Sergeant. Thank you for that excellent presentation. I wanted to comment on what I view as a tremendous success with our seasonal policing. And I want to thank you for bringing forward that initiative last year. I was a little disturbed in your report, you indicated the number of guns that were seized. Was that within the whole detachment catchment area?
It is, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. And the increase in assault and domestic violence, if I heard you correctly, those incidents occurred normally in resort hotels or in provincial campgrounds. Is that correct? And what do you attribute that to?
There was quite a few of the resorts. And that's just, people come here, they unwind maybe a bit too much, and they end up fighting. And then I think, there was one period during the spring last year where I think we were out here 4 nights in a row for disturbances that ended up leading to arrests at one of the resorts. There is one trailer park in town that has a few issues as well from time to time. So it's just, you get, I guess like any tourist town, you do get people that come here and unwind a bit way too much, and one thing leads to another, and that's the result of it.
Yeah, I sometimes often think that when we do have people come and find themselves, perhaps indulging a little bit too much, or just generally that they feel that perhaps the rules or regulations where they reside don't apply when they come out to a resort area. So, I'm also curious about the Forest Service roads. Did you see an increase in attendance up there, or even up Rockwell? I know quite often we hear of rollover trucks when they're coming back down, and perhaps if you could elaborate a little bit on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so last spring, there was definitely a huge increase, because that was about the time they had the restrictions in place where you really weren't supposed to leave your health area, your health zone. So we did have a lot of people from Lower Mainland coming out. You drive up the Forest Service roads, you couldn't park anywhere. There were so many cars. A lot of people that had never gone up there before. So we had lots of accidents, luckily not many serious, but you also had a lot of people that didn't realize why people go out there in the first place. They go up the first Forest Service roads because they don't want to be bothered, and that's where they let loose. So you had families going up there, and there was a few clashes, we'll say, that led to some incidents where things got a little out of control. But once they removed that travel restriction, things kind of returned to normal, and people kind of went on where they normally go for seasonal stuff.
Good. That's good to hear. Thank you. And just one other question, Your Worship, is how did you see the amount of open liquor on the beach last summer? Was it increase or?
I would say it was decreased from the year before, partially because we saw that kind of return back to the family atmosphere, whereas the year before, maybe not so much. It was one of the things that I told my team to get on early, like send the message, initially through education. You can't have open alcohol on the beach. And most people were good about that. The challenging thing now is, people wise up, they get smarter, they put it in Yeti cups, they put it in, very few are actually drinking out of the bottle on the beach anymore. So that's the tough part. So we do our best. I think just the visibility, them knowing that we're around may curb a lot of that initially, so.
Good, that's good to hear. Thank you. Nothing further, your worship.
Councillor Piper? No,
Yeah, just quickly, first off, I think that the beach patrols were effective. I mean, my observation was that they worked very well, so I think that was good. And I think I think your force is doing a great job considering the limited size of your detachment for all the area you have to cover. The one area that I think is always a bit of a loose end, and I just know there's just not adequate resources, is certainly in the summer, one sees a fair amount of speeding on the highway, the provincial highway in general, but particularly on the provincial highway, Lillooet down Harrison Hot Springs Road. And I also suspect a reasonable amount of people that have been drinking, from the Forest Service roads and coming back to the village. And I know it's difficult to allocate, because I ask that every year about the impaired stops, et cetera. Is there, and again, I know you don't have unlimited police force. Is there what kind of a system do you have in place? Like, is there occasional speed traps that are being set up? Is it happening occasionally, or is it just random or on a complaint basis? Again, I fully understand the limitations, but it does seem to be one of the few areas, or one of the areas that continues to be an ongoing sore thumb.
Yep. The short answer is it is random. And a lot of it will depend on the resources we have available. I will say though that if we do get calls about somebody, potential impaired driver, impaired boater, we do respond to those. We did do a lot of checking in and around the boat launch area last year. So people as they're coming off the boats, but also people as they're taking the boats out of the water, right? Because that's, they've been out on the boat all day. Chances are they could have been drinking. So we did a lot to check vehicles at that time, and we did have some success. We did have some impaireds. We had some prohibited drivers. We had. It's just it does boil down to resources, but it is a concern. It's on our radar for sure, because we know that that 5 or 6 o'clock when people start leaving Harrison, all they want to do is get home and beat the traffic, right? So.
Nothing further. Thank you very much.
Hey, Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship, through you to the Sergeant. Just wondering about, just a comment with my colleague. It's BC Highway Patrol, is it not, that does Lillooet and Hot Springs Road in addition, because it's considered highway? Is that not part of the
They have
region
been
as
out there, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they have some resource challenges as well.
Yeah, it seems like it's contagious right now across all sectors. My question is boat patrols. Do you guys still have your boat, and you anticipate on patrolling on water again this summer? That would be great.
Yeah, we've secured our arrangement with the yacht club again. So our boat is full-time in the water and there for response, but also there for patrols as well.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much and please extend my gratitude to your team. They do a wonderful job in our community, and we're very lucky to have such a strong and high profile, because you guys are seeing a lot. So I personally appreciate that. And I know that brings a level of security and safety for our visitors. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just have a quick word before the brass leave here.
We're just running a quick introduction.
Just like to thank Sergeant Sargent for his presentation, and for the superintendent and the inspector to be here as well. We in 2019 did lobby the provincial government with the District of Kent for more policing in the area, and I believe that's how one of them came about, thankfully. I don't think they realized the great geographical area that this detachment has to. Mike pointed out earlier this evening. As far as I'm personally concerned, I've lived in this community for many, many years. And to me, the RCMP are the greatest thing that's ever happened. So I think the resources that we get from the RCMP, especially now and getting into the summer policing as well, which was an idea that came down from Mike to us, and we jumped on that. It's been a tremendous help to the community. We are a very busy, packed resort community in the summer months, and we really appreciate the work that's carried out by Mike and his detachment and the officers. They do an outstanding job. I can't speak enough of the work they do in our area, and I'm glad the block watch is working, those sort of things, and the CTV cameras. Again, thanks for being here this evening. We really appreciate what you do and look forward to just continuing this relationship that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for a quick introduction, as Mike said, my name's Inspector Darren Pankratz. I'm new to the detachment and to the area. Just started here in December. And my scope of responsibility is I oversee, as part of it, is to oversee the Agassiz detachment as well as the Hope detachment. So I just wanted to come and introduce myself and start to make myself more available to the community should there be issues that you want to discuss with both Mike and myself. So feel free through Mike to reach out, and I'm happy to come back and address further issues if Your Worship or Council want further other items specifically brought up. So thank you very much, and I'll introduce the Superintendent.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Your Worship, councilors, staff. I'll be honest with you, I was going to think to myself, there's no way I'm not getting a speaker today. I drove all this way, I'm going to have to say something. But I just wanted to, and I know I took my role in July of this past year, and I know I met with you, Your Worship, right soon after that. And I think one of the commitments I want to make to the community was that at least once a year, myself will be out here. I know Inspector Pankratz, of course, Mike Sargent is out here all the time, but Inspector Pankratz will come on more quarterly basis or periodically to come and speak with you guys. Anyway, there's a few things I wanted just to highlight really quickly. Number one, the additional resources that's coming to Agassiz, that was literally out of the blue. I think every year we ask for additional provincial resources to the province. This past year we submitted for another 4 for Chilliwack, I believe 3 for Hope and 2 for Agassiz. Again, out of the blue, I think about late October-ish, they just came out and said you're getting 1 for Chilliwack, 1 for Agassiz, and a public servant as well. So and they have to be in place by April 1st. So, and that was kind of very quickly, but properly. Of course, we never turned down additional resources, but it's still not what we asked for, but it's a step in the right direction, as I'll call it. To your point, Councillor Hooper, about the issue of the mental health, it is something we continuously address at Chilliwack Hospital. We have routine Fraser Health meetings. It is a source of a sore point for us for long periods of time. While I think the example you highlighted is probably a one-off, I'll be honest with you. The average minutes that our officers, we calculate this on every per case by month, but typically we're seeing about 75 minutes right now on average for officers to wait at the hospital. Now, when I say that is because that's usually probably predominantly that's also Chilliwack's. Chilliwack members are a little bit more in tune to exactly what they have to do, and the old squeaky wheel gets the grease type of attitude. We'll promote that to make sure they continuously bug the nurses to make sure they're looked after, so they're not stuck in there. Unfortunately, they have not entertained the security provisions, and under the Mental Health Act, we cannot leave until the medical practitioner examines and accepts the patient, and that's where the legislation and our hangups are on. So we're not coinciding there, but we're still working with it, Fraser Health as much as we can. I can tell you the city of Chilliwack is putting tremendous amount of pressure on Fraser Health in this regard, because even with the mental health side of things, we actually have 3 municipal resources, and that's all 3 officers do all the time is mental health. And they don't feel like they should have to pay for this considering it's a provincial mandate when you talk about health, right? So let me think what else was there we hit on. Seasonal we hit on. That's really good. You know what, I'll be honest with you, that was a great presentation by Mike. I'm sitting there watching this thing. I'm thinking to myself, I should get Mike to come and do the presentation for Chilliwack when I got to get up there. But he does a great job. So the team is good. We, ourselves, because of the nature of the consolidated detachment, being Chilliwack, Agassiz, Hope, and Boston Bar, as you guys know, Chilliwack, obviously, the big fish in the pond. It's obviously, it's where most of our issues are at, not only with crime, volume, but also with the membership, right? So with all the staff and members, I think we have 136 members now this year for Chilliwack at the municipal and 9 on the provincial side. So obviously, most of our time are spent there, focused there, because just we have those issues. But Mike's doing a fantastic good job out here that we rarely hear anything coming out from your point here, or you're from District of Kent, right? So that being said, I think that's all I got off the top of my head, but I want to make myself available to you to ask away any questions. I want to make sure he does all the kind of the grassroots type of inquiries. But if you have any upper, higher level stuff that you'd like to know from the RCMP, shoot away. And if I can answer, I certainly will. Oh, before you do, probably people are going to ask what's going on with Surrey, right? What's happening with Surrey? Surrey detachment, as we know right now, is holding steady on their resources. As I understand, they're not releasing much resources unless probably even division priorities or promotions. There's no concrete answers for that. As to why, I get my own suspicions because I think everybody's going through the same thing this fall that we're watching, but I'll leave it at that. But having said that, all the officers there have apparently been interviewed by staffing. There's a number of officers that are wanting to come out to Chilliwack area, and probably 65% of the members are wishing to remain in the Lower Mainland. And I know Surrey PD is only hiring a certain amount of percentages, meaning they can't just go and hire a whole bunch of people to fulfill their police force. The province has set limitations for that, so they can only hire so much at a time. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Superintendent. Just to go quickly to the mental health side of it, every month we have a mayor's meeting with our minister and also Fraser Health, and I'm going back to the high-ranking meetings that we have every year in Vancouver that we haven't attended for 2 years due to COVID. But the issue comes up every time from most of the municipalities regarding the time spent by the police at the hospitals, and it is not their job. And we continuously lobby for them to do something about that system. So there's a lot lobbying that goes on from the mayors, from Hope all the way to Coquitlam, continuously in regards to mental health. So that we are continuously working on your behalf as well to try and resolve those issues.
Thank you, Your Worship. I much appreciate the support and the help.
Any questions?
One last one, again on mental health. If you take someone to the hospital under Section 28, they're sort of causing threats and aggravation to a resident. If they're not sectioned at the hospital, do you have to bring them back to this community?
Short answer would be yes, because obviously it's not fair for that individual because they're no longer held in custody to be left in abandoned foreign area for them. So, and quite constantly, then we would hear from a Chilliwack business about an individual who's causing potential problems afterwards, if that's the case, about why this individual's in their community when they were brought here by the police, and shouldn't the police take the individual home? So, yes, so as a general rule of thumb, we will try to make efforts to bring the person back.
So it's not like the City of London police where they move them over the border and just leave them there.
No, if I had a choice, I just take the Abbotsford, but
Any other questions? None? None? Superintendent? Okay. Well, thanks again for coming this evening. It's much appreciated to yourself and the inspector to be here with sergeants, and we appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
And the next order of business, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We'll move right on to number 10, as we have no items for 8 and 9. So that would be reports of councilors, committees, committee of the whole, and commission.
Yeah, good evening. On the 23rd of February, I attended the Agassiz Harrison Historical Society Working Group meeting. Again, on the 23rd of February and the 2nd of March, I took part in the webinars on the Alzheimer's Society of BC. 25th and 24th of March, I attended training with the CNIB. On the 14th of February, I attended a Zoom meeting with the BCCRN as part of Fraser Hill. On the 2nd of March, I attended a webinar with the Teramac Institute. On the 7th of, on the 8th, today, I attended a Zoom meeting with the Miami River Streamkeeper Society, who are a great value to this community. They look after the river, they do the invasive species, they clear the trails and that, and they got a great stewardship with the training with the schools and the rest of it. So all the best to them. And I'd just like to point out on the 9th of March is the International Women's Day. And on the 15th of June is the World Elders Abuse Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
None of my three responsibilities had meetings in the last 2 weeks. Thank you.
Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship. On March 1st, I attended online the Harrison Eggsy Chamber of Commerce meeting. Of interest out of that meeting, BC Business Match is for communities outside of Vancouver and is a program that helps entrepreneurs and their families to find the right business for their interests, skills, and relocate from large urban centers. The program will provide training and tools, find the right business match, one-to-one support from professional advisors, and access to community resources and connections. They have a great video online that describes the program in length, and it should be noted that the program closes March 31st of this year. So if you've been thinking or dreaming about working for yourself, this is a great program that could help guide you towards fulfilling those dreams. You can check it out online at BC Business Match, all one word, .ca, bcbusinessmatch.ca. On March 2nd, I attempted to attend the Corrections Canada Citizens Advisory Committee meetings, but unfortunately those technology gremlins had different ideas and they needed to cancel both the meetings. So looking forward to next month's meeting. And Tuesday, March 8th is International Women's Day. So please take time and honor those extraordinary women in your lives. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Your Worship. On February 24th, I attended the Lower Mainland Local Government Association Executive Board meeting. And on February 26th, I wanted to make note that I attended the annual Chilliwack Coldest Night of the Year 5K walk, which helped to raise funds for the Ann Davis Transition Society. And I was honored to be on the same team as our MLA, Kelly Padden. In 2021, participants in this walk raised over $58,000 to help support the Transition Society in housing women and children fleeing abusive relationships. That's also my plug for tomorrow being International Women's Day, and not only to celebrate the achievements of women, both business-wise, education-wise, politically, but also want people to take the time to realize that there's still much to be done. And especially with homelessness and housing women and children who still need to flee abusive relationships. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Council. Next order of business, please.
Yes, your worship, we'll move on to number 11, reports from the mayor.
Thank you. Don't have too much here, but anyway, as most of us, I'm sure with most people around the world, our thoughts are with the people in Ukraine and what's going on there. So I asked our staff that the lights at the plaza and the bandstand will be blue and yellow. We couldn't do both colors, unfortunately, with our display digital board. It doesn't work that way, but we've got it blue. So that's just out of some way of showing our respect for these people and the terrible tragedies they're going through at this moment. At the Fraser Valley Regional District's open meeting on February the 24th, there wasn't too much except that they are going to be lobbying UBCM, the regional districts, regarding the increase for the disaster financial assistance funding, a DFA, for homeowner applications, which haven't increased since 1996. And of course, there's many folks out there who lost their homes during this past flooding that we had. So that's going to UBCM for that. And there were appointments to the Stolo Treaty Association, and Director Stobart was obviously picked for that. He's been dealing with the First Nations Treaty table for many years. And he is also appointed to the board appointment to the Metro Vancouver Indigenous Relations Committee as well. So that's Director Stobart, who will be carrying on with those duties. At the Chilliwack Collaborative meeting on February the 28th, communication was a big discussion point. More resources going into emergency management after the terrible flooding that occurred last November due to the past floods and fires. They still maintain the 72-hour for households to have supplies in case things break down. I reiterated by saying I don't believe in the 72 hours. It should be a week. I see how 72 hours can really be sufficient in certain cases. And there is more attachments, as what came up this evening from the RCMP and members of the council regards to mental health, where some time ago, it used to take 18 months to 2 years to see a doctor to deal with mental health. It's now down to 4 months. More have been recruited. HSO, Health Standards Organization Service for Youth, as it is integrated in one of 6 sites selected in Canada, and Chilliwack was one of them. They deal with 5 nights a week for consultation. There's going to be a new mental health center, substance use building starting in March. As things are improving, vaccination clinics are closing down. You can go to the pharmacy and get your shots if you still need them. And maybe the doctors as well, I believe. And also with the testing stations, now you can get a self-testing kits. Also acute care and COVID units. There was a big reduction because of staff shortages due to illnesses. So they had their problems to deal with there. And I invited the collaborative group to come as a delegation at some point to council to do a presentation for us. The OCP update, get into it, Harrison, was in your mailboxes last week, so that's for folks to get involved, and all the dates are on the back regards to how the process is moving along. Thanks staff for doing this and getting it moving. So that's there for people to follow as the steps move forward with that. We had a meeting with, which I mentioned earlier, to the superintendent, our monthly meeting with the senior levels of government, our municipal affairs minister. Unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but we lost Josie Osborne as our minister. She's gone on to lands and water resources. And now we have a new minister, Nathan Cullen, who's taken over that position. So he went through 37 different municipalities within an hour, just in over an hour. Some were there, some were not. There were no specific questions that they gave us this time to answer, but I just wished Minister Osborne all the very best in the new portfolio and welcomed our new minister, and Minister Bear was there as well, because she was there to discuss the internet connections in rural communities. Provinces put in 289 million into this to improve internet connections. And as some of us know, some of the rural areas way up have had real problems or no internet connection at all. So they're moving ahead with that. And some of the mayors got off subject, as always happens at these meetings, but they just went on again with their concerns about childcare, transportation, ambulances, where Mission, they've been tremendously reduced in their ambulance contingent there, and vacant homes, and of course, substance use. So that was that meeting, and oh, that's it. That's me done. Thank you. Next order of business, please.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 12, reports from staff. The first report is from the planning consultant regarding consideration of issuance of development permit 0221 for 798 Hot Springs Road.
Trustee, page 43.
Thank you, Your Worship. The site is approximately 2.7 hectares in size, is currently vacant, and is accessible from Hot Springs Road. To the north, the area is zoned R5, the westerly area, or the Aspen Lane area is zoned R3, and to the south of the site, the area is zoned Commercial 3. The applicant is proposing a 40 strata lot residential subdivision for the site. The parcel size will be similar in size to the parcels located to the north at 750 Hot Springs Road. The parcel sizes for the 40 lot subdivision is from a low of 135 square meters to a high of 197 square meters. The site is within the tourist commercial designation, and the site is within 2 development permit areas, one addressing forming character for tourism-related development projects, and one to address the geotechnical issues. The site is zoned R5 residential, resort residential. The guidelines for the geotech hazard in the tourist commercial area can be found in the official community plan, specifically for the geotech. You can find it in section 9.4.4 of the OCP on pages 48 to 52. Please note that as this project is not a tourism-related project, the form and character requirements are not applicable. The staff is of the opinion that this application does not need to be referred to any external agency, and there is no covenant registered against the property that addresses any potential flooding issues. And given that the site has a portion of the Miami Slough located on the property, a riparian area protection regulation assessment is required as per provincial legislation. The riparian area protection regulations and conditions and requirements are located or included as part of the proposed development permit 02/21, and specifically on page 49 of the report, section 6.2. And as well, both reports are attached to the development permit under section 8 of the development permit on pages 49. With that, your worship, staff is recommending that development permit DP 02/21 be issued to 1091760 BC Limited for property located at 798 Hot Springs Road, Harrison Hot Springs, for land legally described as Lot 9, Section 12, Township 4, Range 29, west of the 6th Meridian, New Westminster District Plan 5519, subject to the registration of a flood covenant that is acceptable to the village on title, and that council waive the requirements for the tourism commercial development permit area for this application, as the proposed development is not a tourism-related project.
Thank you, Mr. Cossey. Do we have a recommendation? Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Piper, second by Councillor Vital. Discussion. Councillor Hooper and Councillor Palmer.
Yes, good evening. I just wonder, where is the stormwater for this development going to be discharged? Because there's no stormwater drainage down Hot Springs Road. And I'm not sure if we actually own the drainage ditch at the back. So I'd hate to see us actually discharge water onto private property. Thank you.
Mr. Cossey?
Thank you, your worship. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we're working through a subdivision, a 40-lot strata subdivision, and that issue will be addressed at the subdivision stage.
Yeah, does this bear any resemblance to the subdivision service bylaw that is still outstanding that we applied for back in 2018? I think we paid CTQ $60,000 to do it.
Your worship, the current subdivision and development bylaw that's currently in place is applicable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. So when I look at the plan, I'm just, of course, this has come before us for a variance before. When I look at the plan, it shows a strip, a significant strip for road widening, 4.5, 4.75, that they, obviously that's land that they must vest to the village. Is that correct? No?
Cossey?
I'm sorry, where's the area you're looking at?
The road widening, is that strip being vested to either the ministry or to the village?
Oh, that's still being negotiated through the subdivision process with the Ministry of Transportation. But they haven't determined as to what they need yet. You're talking about the strip along the...
Yes.
Yes, yeah, they haven't come back formally and said, we need this or need that.
Will that strip be paved? Will there be a sidewalk there? Do we know?
That's still all to be worked out if and when the Ministry of Transportation gets back to us. Because they are a referral on the subdivision process.
So I'm just trying to get clarity. So from the village point of view, in terms of there being a sidewalk, that's not something that we would be concerned about or would be part of the negotiation?
Oh, yes, yeah. When we talk with the operations manager, all of those things would have to be looked at, yes.
Will it come back to council at that time? Will we see that?
The agreement or the
Well,
works and service?
I'm not trying to be difficult. The lack of sidewalks in our community always surprises me, that there's new complexes and there's not sidewalks, or it just seems to be such a patchwork. So I was thinking if it was that it would show up in the development permit, or will we see if there's a sidewalk there? Like how would I know if that's, I'm interested that actually would be paved and that there would be a sidewalk. Maybe this isn't the point to address that, but I'm not totally sure that that's going to come before us at some point in the future.
No, you're right. At this point, it's the development permit guidelines, and the development permit guidelines make no reference to a sidewalk along the highway. Where that issue would have to be addressed is through the subdivision servicing and development bylaw, and that requirement is in as a mandate, as it's got to be so thick and so wide. So when that happens, the operations manager would have to follow that requirement. And then whatever it is that we've agreed to through that process, it becomes a works and services agreement that they gotta follow whatever the diagram is that's associated with that type of sidewalk in the subdivision and development services bylaw.
And excuse my ignorance, can I just go continue? I'm just trying to, I guess what triggered this is that I'm looking, they're not paying any deposit for any works being done. So then I was in the, as a condition, so it talks about none required in terms of we're not asking for an irrevocable letter of credit at this point, right?
That's correct.
So, and that's what triggered me to think, well, surely there must be some work that we're requiring them to do. How will we secure that things like if there's a sidewalk required, that they do the sidewalk? Is there a further point later on? that
Yes,
they'll be
there is.
asked
That's through the
in order to
subdivision
get their
process.
subdivision plan signed?
Yes.
Their strata plan signed, I should
Yes.
say.
They have to do all of those requirements. And in there is discussion on meeting all of the engineering and the servicing requirements of that bylaw.
But that won't come back to council, but we can feel comfortable that that will happen.
Yes, because it's been
required.
passed through the bylaw. We can't violate that. The only thing that we can do is if they request it, is if they ask for a development variance of those requirements, then that comes back to council. They have the right to ask for any development variance requirement of the subdivision servicing bylaw.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Councillor Vital?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Sorry. Thank you. Through you to Mr. Cossey. Just a couple questions, and again, this may be addressed as we move further along, but I'm looking at the plan on page 47, and to me, it's indicating 2 accesses onto Hot Springs Road. Do those accesses already exist, or is that something that would need to get approval from Ministry of Highways?
Cossey?
Yes, Your Worship, they would need to get approval through the ministry. This is just their proposed subdivision plan. Because there's a lot of other issues that have been addressed, like the development's variance permit. We've also asked for the community amenity buildings to be put in place, the visitor parking and everything else. So this is a long way from a final document.
Great. Thank you. And just one other quick question is, and I know our operations manager isn't here tonight, but are you aware, or perhaps another staff member, that we can get some assurances that our current infrastructure will be able to support another subdivision of that size? Thank you.
The CAO has a comment?
Yes, I can speak to that just generally. Both our water and wastewater systems are sized for the planned build out of these developments. So there's no real concern there, but of course it always comes down to being the responsibility of the developer to ensure that any infrastructure upgrades or new infrastructure to be added is at the cost of the developer, and that comes along later during the subdivision process through the negotiation with the servicing agreement.
Thank you, CAO. Nothing further, Your Worship.
Hey, Councillor, any other councillors have any comments on this? Like Mr. Cossey says, we're just here for the development tonight. The nuts and bolts come later on when they start discussing the building permits and everything else. So, and the subdivision portion. No further comments. I'll call the question on the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Hooper. Motion passes. Next order of business, please.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next report, also from the planning consultant regarding public hearing follow-up for zoning bylaw, zoning amendment bylaw number 1168 for 511 Littlewood Avenue.
Page 51, Mr. Cossey.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a summary of all of the public hearing, the public information meeting, and the referral process for proposed zoning amendment bylaw 1168/2021. Looking quickly back at the background information, the village's official community plan indicates that the site is within the Lakeshore Beach area designation, the waterfront commercial area, and within the Lakeshore planning area. As per the village's zoning bylaw, the site is zoned as Commercial 1, Village Commercial C1, and is bounded by Littlewood Avenue to the south, Spruce Street to the west, and Randall Park to the north. Zoning amendment bylaw 1168/2021 received first and second readings on July 27th, 2021. Brief description of the project. There will be approximately 1,044 square meters of commercial space, approximately 124 dwellings, condominiums with short-term tourist rental accommodations being offered. The development site is approximately 0.43 hectares or 1.06 acres in size. Approximately 31 bicycle parking stalls are included, and a two-story parkade is being proposed. From the public realm improvements is offered by the developer include parking and streetscape improvements, and there's a list of 6 activities associated with that, including public bench and bike racks, new public sidewalks, new curbs and new storm drainage, new public trees will be installed and maintained, a public barbecue stand and a public children's play area for up to $10,000 through a community amenities contribution, and a public art contribution of up to $10,000 through the same process. New landscaping on 3 sides of the public washroom located in Randall Park. And with respect to the dwelling units, there will be a maximum of 10% of the residential units will be accessible units. Note of the 124 total units are being proposed for this development. Some are for commercial use, for short-term rentals, and some are for residential use. In terms of accessibility, the project must meet the BC Building Code requirements for universal accessibility as per the Building Access Handbook 2014. Council also authorized staff to refer the application to the 4 agencies below that included the Advisory Planning Commission, the village's fire department, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and the Fraser Valley Regional District. We've performed a title review of the parcel. The site has been reviewed and there's no flood covenant registered on title. Looking now at all of the public hearing, the public information meeting, the comments from the referral agencies and the submissions received, we've broken them out into different categories and summarized each of these categories for you. At the public hearing, there were 10 individuals that provided input on October 20th, 2021. These are not listed in any ranking order. They're just listed generally at this point in time. Parking is an issue for both the commercial and residential components of the project. Sun and increased shade, no information is provided to address this issue. Proof that this is a sustainable development project needs to be provide significant community contributions. The building is too high, protection of public trees, sight lines at the intersection of Littlewood Avenue and Spruce Street, and better utilization of the space. Of the public submissions, 9 submissions were received before the close of the public hearing. And this include parking, again, not listed in any order. Parking, community health and mitigating climate change, loss of sunlight and shadows, trees, ecosystems and loss of the trees, potential loss of views, provincial highway, lots of heavy traffic, boat launch congestion, and the $15,000 cash in lieu figure for the parking is too low. We've also listed out the referral agency comments. MOTI has no comments or concerns. The Fraser Valley Regional District, the boat launch, it is important not to impede boat launch traffic or parking. The Advisory Planning Commission, when we had our meeting, this is a summary of the comments that they've put forward. We have to incorporate crime prevention through environmental design principles in the design layout, concern for the lack of parking, and on the suggested public realm improvements, the suggested offer of $10,000 is too low. In addition, as the suggested streetscaping offer will be adjusted through the design and form development permit requirements, it is really a requirement and should not be considered as an offer. The fire department, no emergency access issues for the fire department. The public information meeting, 18 submissions were received and approximately 40 attended and 24 utilized the sign-in sheet. This is the meeting that the council requested that the developer hold on their own, and they provided us with the minutes. And this meeting was held on August the 26th, 2021, from 11 to 3. The comments that were received, again in no specific order, include parking. How has this development shown that their carbon imprint as per goal 10 of the OCP has been met? Design does not fit with the surrounding uses. Risk of increased fire spreading. The amenities, children's playground and rental park, pier boardwalk near the water, public washrooms in the building, and they need to provide 150 parking spaces. And then the comment on trees. So what we've done, Your Worship, is staff has looked at various land use issues received through this process and changes to which include changes to the lot coverage. And this increases the cover that can reduce or prevent the absorption of stormwater into land. Water runoff can cause drainage problems to the property and for neighboring properties. The applicant needs to provide proof that this is not an issue or provide engineered drawings outlining how this issue will be addressed. The building height, the section 3.1.2 of the OCP suggests 6 stories in areas closer to the edge of the village and close to the base of the mountains could be permitted. A maximum height of 4 stories is recommended within the Lakeshore Special Planning Area, with exemptions being made for small portions of buildings with landmark value up to 6 stories permitted, preferably close to the village edge, away or near the base of the mountains. However, if the developer is going to be allowed to build bigger buildings, they should be seen as giving something back to the community. This can include, but not be limited to, any of the following: a high quality design, improved public space, and other factors that can add to the character of the site under consideration. As there was also a lot of discussion or information with respect to the loss of views in the sunshade review. We've listed various OCP requirements on addressing this potential loss of the views. The first being the view protection modes outlined in the official community plan on the top of page 55. And there's in that official community plan, you have 2 types of sight lines. You have your major sight lines, which are the heavier lines, and then the minor sight lines, which are the slighter line widths. Please note that these lines are in relation to the proposed development. Technically, the project is outside of both the major and minor sight lines. However, it is adjacent to a major area. Addressing the view analysis further, as per page 81 of the OCP, it can be set up to address the following goal and the following design guideline objective: to protect and enhance visual connections between the village and Harrison Lake, as outlined on page 79 of the official community plan. The other things that we'll have to take into consideration, of course, would be the protection of the view quarters within the village towards Harrison Lake and the surrounding mountains. Therefore, the following from page 81 suggests, where applicable, a view analysis and accurate rendering of the proposed development in its real context may be required to ensure that new development does not unreasonably block out visual connections to the lake. So that is a discretionary power of council, that if you want to do that, you have the ability to do that. Where applicable, a sunshade impact study may be required to prevent unwelcome shading of public or private uses. The general intent of this technical document is to provide a visual model and written description of the potential impacts of shadows casted by the proposed development. Turning now to the floor area ratio, there's a very general rule: if a developer wants to increase the floor area ratio, the guiding concept should be the adjacent road leading to the development. The general guidelines are as follows: if the current road is 30 to 40 feet wide, 9.1 to 12.1 meters, then that road can support a 20% increase. The next level of the road that's between 12.1 to 18.2 meters is a 30% increase. And a road that is 60 feet plus wide, you can look at a 40% increase. The Lillooet Avenue right-of-way width varies, but is approximately 30.2 meters on average. The FAR asked is an increase of approximately 54%, and based upon the above road width, it can accommodate the expected increase. With respect to sightlines at the intersection, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure have indicated that they have no comments or concerns with the proposed development, and this is based upon their email dated August the 24th, 2021. Potential loss of public trees. Prior to any development taking place, a tree survey will need to be provided. This survey must outline what trees are in Randall Park and what trees are on private property. Parking issue. This project is deficient on the number of stalls required. This issue needs to be addressed before any approvals are provided. We've put in here a little notation on servicing, and this includes the standard works and services issues and development permit issues for the form and character of the building. At this time, this information is provided for the information of council. At some point through this approval process, the applicant will be required to provide engineering plans indicating how the following on-site and off-site municipal services and development permit issues will be provided. This includes paved roadways, private roads, sidewalk, curbs and gutters, street lighting, public utilities, including fire hydrants, sanitary sewer, or stormwater infrastructure and facilities, stormwater and overland drainage facilities, boulevards, medians, pathway and walkways, street furniture, building materials and the project colors, park and recreation amenities, a landscape plan which adheres to fire smart principles. The provisions of these servicing plans can be a condition of council prior to giving final reading to the rezoning bylaw. Some will be required during the development permit process, and some may be required at the building inspection level. From a safety perspective, the village's fire department has indicated that they do not have any emergency access issues with the proposed development. As a part of the works and services agreement, the applicants will be required to prove that they have adequate fire flow and protection to the proposed new building. The traffic congestion issue, we can request a traffic flow study to address the potential congestion for the Randall Park boat launch. Are there any areas that can assist criminal activity? This was a big one that was discussed at the Advisory Planning Commission, and we can request a crime prevention through environmental design, what is referred to as a CEPTED review around the proposed upgraded washrooms or any other dark areas around the building. With respect to the community amenity contributions, as per policy 1.26, negotiations have started with the developer. The developer has offered $10,000 to be used for a public bench, creating barbecue stands and a child's play area. In addition, they have offered $10,000 for the creation of a public works of art. In discussion with the village's senior staff, the suggestion is a minimum $30,000 contribution towards park amenities to be implemented at the discretion of council. And point number 13, or the carbon imprint, or goal number 10 of the official community plan, additional information is required to outline how this development will address the next issue or this issue. And for our next steps, staff is of the opinion that no further readings of the bylaw be provided until the above referenced deficiencies and issues have been addressed. This does not include issues identified in point 8 above. With that, your worship, staff is recommending that zoning amendment bylaw 1168, 2021 not be given any further readings until the following has been provided and accepted by council: a view impact study, a sunshade review, a tree survey including on-site trees and those which border the site on public property, a parking plan including any potential impact on the boat launch parking area, a local traffic impact review, a crime prevention through environmental design review of the proposed community washrooms and the proposed development, complete negotiations as per the community amenity contributions policy, information outlining how has the applicant intends to address the reduction of their carbon footprint is required for this project. All the on-site parking requirements have been met or arrangements have been made to address this issue that are satisfactory to council.
Okay, Mr. Cossie. So we have a recommendation. Do we have a move and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Vital, seconded by Councillor Piper. Discussion, Councillor Hooper.
For the attendees on Zoom, we're just in a short recess.
Okay, we'll resume the meeting. Anybody have any questions? Councillor Hooper?
To start through your worship, page 52, dwelling unit, special needs. Now it says 10% of all residential units will be accessible units, but we don't know how many units are going to be residential, do we? We could be down as many as 40. So that needs to be clarified on how many of these units are going to be residential. On the local traffic impact review. Now, with these developments and the others that are going on down there at the moment, a large amount of that traffic will be coming down Eagle and over the bridge. So therefore, I propose that either they're told they don't use that route, or we put a weight restriction on that bridge to enforce it. The bridge is already suffering at Eagle and McCombs, and we don't really want, in the summer months when you've got parents walking down there with their children, being bypassed by heavy vehicles. So the local traffic impact review should look at that as a matter of urgency and on safety. Thank you.
Mr. Costa, you have any comments on that?
Yes, your worship, with respect to the comment on the residential units, you're correct. At this particular point in time, we do not know how many are going to be residential and how many are going to be commercial. However, when we get to the building permit stage, those issues will have to be addressed and we will have more detailed information. And as we go along through this process, we can discuss that point with the applicant. And that was the reason why I put in here that the project must meet the building code requirements, even though they've tried to imply that they're going to be doing something over and above that. And also with the local impact study, yes, we can start looking at all the routes and everything else. They could be responsible as part of the works and services for any potential upgrades.
Costa, no, you don't? Okay. Any other councillor have a comment? Councillor Palmer.
So what we're doing today, I understand, is we're just simply putting it on hold until they come back with all of these reports. So I'm definitely supportive of that, as I certainly wasn't supportive of the first two readings. And I mean, the concerns that which were highlighted in my mind were the on-site parking. So if they come back with, we're asking them to come back and determine how they can do proper on-site parking. So that makes me happy. The tree survey, including trees that which they border the site on public property. So one of the big concerns was that all of those tall trees bordering the property seemed from their presentation would be removed because some of the roots are on the development property, and that's, I guess, part of the problem that arises from the floor area ratio making the building so big. So will the tree survey, I guess it'll come back and tell exactly what trees they want to have removed, which doesn't still solve the problem for those of us who are not eager to see any of those trees removed, but at least it brings that information for us when we make this decision, right? Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, it's useful to get all of that information. I can't say I've seen anything that makes me feel any more charitably or favorably towards a proposal at this stage, but I think I'm happy to see it kind of put on hold until these issues are dealt with. Thank you.
Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, now they've applied for a 6-story building, yes. The 2 parkades, 4 stories above that. But one of them parkades is only be partial, isn't it? Because the ground floor is going to be commercial. So I'm a bit confused on how we're coming to all this. Is it going to be 6 stories? Is it going to be a 2-story parkade or just 1 and a bit parkade? Thank you.
Mr. Cossey, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, the application that they presented that we have to comment on at this point in time, it's a 2-story parkade.
So if we're just looking at a 2-story parkade, then we're not looking at any commercial units of taking part of that parkade away.
As far as I know, they've got their 2 stories for the parkade, and above that will be at the street level will be the commercial component of that 1,000 square meters.
So is part of this parkade going to be below ground?
The parking study will respond to all of these issues. Because what we're saying at this particular point in time is you don't have enough parking space on site for your vehicles. And what we need to see from you, no matter how you're going to do it, we need to see how you're going to park on site these various requirement of vehicles.
Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be supporting the recommendation this evening, but I just wanted to take a moment and thank those members that sit on the APC. There was really fantastic feedback that came out of that meeting, and I appreciate the time they took and dug their teeth into it. And they brought forward questions that I had dancing around in my head as well. So thank you to the APC.
Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will also be supporting the recommendation. I do want to make a special comment, and that I do accept that both staff and the APC agree that the initial offer of community amenity contributions is not sufficient, and certainly support staff on continued negotiations with the developer. And a question to Mr. Cossey, recommendation number F, a crime prevention through environmental design review. From what I understand, that is a kind of a proactive approach that uses a set of priorities which identify proper design and strategies, which hopefully lead to a reduction in potential crime. Is that correct?
Yes, your worship, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to also echo Councillor Palmer's comments on a tree survey. And I'm really pleased to see that this is included in the recommendation. It seems that we are losing trees in the village, both in public and private areas, and it's important we preserve viable trees in public and private spaces, which provide so much benefit environmentally for our residents and for our visitors' well-being. Recommendation I on-site parking requirements. Seems every comment either from the public or has come from this council has to do with parking, and it still causes me considerable concern. And with that said, I'm happy to see these recommendations, Your Worship, and I support all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer? The light is on? No? Oh, thank you. No further questions? Yeah, it's pretty obvious that there's a lot to be answered here by the developers, so I'm not going to have any comments to say. It's all the issues that council brought up previously are all addressed here from A to I, and we'll see what happens as in the coming future on this development. I call the question. All in favour of the recommendation? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Hooper. Motion passes. Next order of business, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to the report of the operations manager regarding implementation of restricted parking on Pine Avenue and McCombs Drive, and I believe the CAO will speak to the matter.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Thank you. I'm going to excuse myself from this topic because my property fronts one street and my side and backyard are on the other street. So it would not be appropriate for me to comment. So I'll excuse myself.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. And the CAO will be answering this evening.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm pleased to present the report of the operations manager, which is once again about parking. But this really is just follow-up to the parking master plan, which was received by council on January 28th of this year. It was prepared by the IBI group. It provided a number of short-term, medium, and long-term recommendations with respect to parking. And two of the short-term recommendations concerned Pine Avenue and McCombs Drive. Both issues of parking on Pine Avenue and McCombs Drive have come up at council on numerous occasions within the past year or two. So without further ado, I would just like to present the recommendation that Pine Avenue be restricted for the purpose of safety reasons to one side only parking. So restrict the south side to no parking, since the parking supply on the north side is larger. And on McCombs, of course, we're going to recommend that there be no parking on the east side. That's the forested side of McCombs Drive. Again, to prevent parking on that side, which has been damaging and interrupting the functionality of our new trail there. So the recommendation is that no parking signage be installed on portions of Pine Avenue and McCombs Drive to restrict parking to one side only.
Moved by Councillor Palmer. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Vital, discussion? Councillor Hooper?
Yes, I see that parking will be, there'll be no parking either side of Pine for 150 metres from the junction of Hot Springs Road, which doesn't leave a lot of Pine left to park in. I mean, to be quite honest, there's no sidewalks in Pine. If we park any vehicles on one side, we're forcing pedestrians further into the road. The road's narrow. It just ought to stay as, well, it ought to be no parking either side of Pine. I know that there's a lack of parking spaces for the townhouses that are in Pine, but that isn't our problem. That's the problem of the previous council that actually permitted them to build there with the lack of parking for visitors and for trailers and boats. As for parking in McCombs on the east side, again, that is because there's a lack of parking within Schooner and Emerson Place. Now, if you park on one side of McCombs, you're going to have to realign the centre line of McCombs Road, which will push more vehicles over towards the pedestrian trail we put in. And there's parts of McCombs which will not actually, if you get two vehicles past a parked car, they'll be driving on or right up close, very close to that trail. So again, this wants to be looked at very carefully, because if we're only going to restrict this to part of McCombs, which I feel would be the better idea, we're not going to provide many car spaces. Plus, the sight lines laid down on the 25-metre radius of 0.5 to 3 metres from the headways, sight lines in height will restrict it even further. So again, as I've been saying all the time, when we do these developments, we've got to look at the bigger picture. So I can't support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor comments? I'll just have a couple of comments to make. When council is making a decision on development, we're governed by what regulations are allowed in the subdivision bylaw in regards to parking. There is adequate parking. I've counted them there at the Breeze. The idea of from the Breeze to Hot Springs Road, because of the curve of the road, that's why it suggested no parking on either side. On McCombs, it's one of the widest roads in the village, so there's adequate space there. This is my perspective. Adequate space there on the side where we have a few sections of sidewalk. Yeah, whether the center line has to be moved, that could be taken care of by the staff from that perspective. But this will make it much safer on the east side where the trail is, with no parking whatsoever all the way to McPherson. So that makes the road much better from that perspective and safer. At the moment, the people on Emerson Cove and Spinnaker and the Spinnaker there, if there is any traffic that's on the road at the moment, it's normally service traffic who are servicing there. Shouldn't be. They have been moved and has to be moved. There's also on Emerson Cove, they do have parking for visitor parking as well. They have gravel spaces carved out in between the houses. Spinnaker Wind doesn't. So both that development and the Breeze do have parking for visitors. Unfortunately, Spinnaker Wind doesn't, but they have quite large driveways to park. You can get up to 3 or 4 vehicles and also an RVs on there as well, small RVs, not long ones. But overall, I'm glad this is moving forward. My concern has been McCombs and with the new trail that we get this no parking signs up, make it safer for folks. The trail is being used very well. And the next course of action will be, I suppose, at some point, will be how we, this is not tonight, is how we deal with the speed as well on there. And Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, on McCombs, you've got 2 areas which are going to allow parking where there's drainage ditches. Now, as we all know, we've all done it. You step out of your passenger in the car, you step out and you trip. You're down the drainage ditch. I mean, them areas should be taken completely off of this. Also, by doing this parking, especially in Pine, your active transportation plans out. Where the cyclist going to go? Where's the mother going to go that's got a stroller, a young child and a dog? She takes up the whole room. We say about the trail in McCombs, but we've put post in the middle of the trail where it starts and finishes. We've obstructed the trail ourselves. So let's be quite frank with this. If you do anything when traffic's concerned and young children, cyclists, you need to be absolutely sure you've got it right. Because if someone gets injured or that, I don't know, I couldn't live with it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor. I think that previous and this council is covering the safety issues very appropriately. We put in now the new crosswalk with the flashing lights and also the advanced flashing light before you get to the crosswalk going from south to north. From that perspective, from Emerald to Ramona and beyond, there is no houses there. So the ditch wouldn't be of any concern because no cars ever park there. So there's no houses along there till you get into the subdivision, Angus Estates. From that perspective. Councillor Palmer, was that you with your hand up? Thank you.
Yes. So in listening to Councillor Hooper's thoughts, he may be right that it may well be that Pine is so narrow there shouldn't be parking on either side. I'm not sure, and I'm not certain that I agree with him that McCombs shouldn't have parking on the one side. But it does hit me that if Councillor Hooper is correct, either way, we're not taking a step backwards by closing the parking on the east side of McCombs on the one side of Pine. We're not quite doing as much as he's suggesting, but it still is a step forward. And if I think that once we do this, it doesn't stop us from closing the parking on the other side, if for safety reasons that becomes self-evident that we should do so. So I haven't thought my way through. I'd have to take a more careful look at the roads in terms of Councillor Hooper's thoughts, but I don't think what we're proposing to do with this motion harms or is a step backwards. It still is working towards making it safer by closing the one side from parking on each of those roads. So, and again, if Councillor Hooper turns to be right and we all think that's the case, then we simply have to put signs on the other side if that's what's required. So I'm feeling comfortable we should at least go ahead with the motion before us today. And if he's correct, maybe we'll have to revisit it with some more signs. Thank you.
Like you said, Councillor, this is a work in progress. We've gone from the discussions a year ago to the committee of the wholes, to a parking study, which we asked for, council asked for, and this is what's come out of it. I was adamant myself personally about the Pine one being that both sides because of the bend of the road there before you hit Hot Springs Road, and we do get traffic that parks on that side on weekends, not from the complexes, but from across the road, the other side of Hot Springs Road. they tend to park there when there's overflow parking on the other side of Hot Springs Road. So that to me is very important, that section that's got no parking on either side. And then we'll, as time goes along, they'll be reviewed, looked at, and if there's any adjustments to be made, they can be made. It's a start, and we always have to start somewhere and move forward. Councillor Vital, you have nothing to say? No? You do?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do support this recommendation. And as you so alluded to, that we move ahead as we need to. My only concern and with the no parking areas is enforcement. And I know that you know, during our tourist season, we seem to always concentrate our bylaws personnel down on the beach. So it may be difficult to, you know, have any bylaw enforcement on it. But hopefully putting up the no parking signs will be enough of a deterrent. I walk the McCombs Trail on a regular basis, Your Worship, and it is being used much more frequently, which is a good thing to see. And I think by still allowing parking on the west side of McCombs, it may entice people more to use the trail rather than walking down and using the actual road itself. So thank you, Your Worship.
So on the recommendation, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Hooper. Motion passes. We'd like to ask Councillor Piper to come back, please. And the next order of business, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to the next report. This is from the Community Services Manager regarding public facility use during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Michelle?
Thank you, Your Worship. The order of the Provincial Health Officer for gatherings and events released on February 16, 2022 modified the restrictions on private gatherings and events. These functions may now take place at a venue's full capacity. However, indoor organized events must still require proof of vaccination and the wearing of masks. Our liability insurance provider has now provided examples of effective strategies local governments can implement to mitigate risk arising from renting out facilities to third parties. This includes requiring event organizers to provide a COVID-19 safety plan, along with procedures that give evidence of their understanding and capacity to ensure the order is complied with by all attendees. These strategies are particularly important for local governments who do not have staff on site at events to ensure compliance with the health orders. The recommendation is that all public and municipal property be reopened to third-party rentals who have the capacity to ensure compliance with public health orders subject to availability.
Thank you. Do we have a mover and a second? Moved by Councillor Piper, second by Councillor Palmer. Discussion? Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, the recommendation says that the public and municipal property will reopen to third-party rentals who have the capability to ensure compliance with the public health requirements as subject to availability. So if the social club comes up with a policy, they will be allowed to come back here for the car plane.
Bill?
Correct?
That's correct. Any group that can meet the requirements would be allowed to submit an application.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? None being? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Nobody opposed? Motion passes. Next order of business, please.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 13, bylaws. We have a report from the financial officer regarding the 2022-2026 financial plan, bylaw number 1174, 2022.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the February 22nd, 2022 regular council meeting, the 2022 to 2026 financial plan received second and third readings. Accordingly, the 2022 to 2026 financial plan is attached for adoption. The recommendation is that the 2022 to 2026 financial plan bylaw number 1174, 2022 be adopted. Thank you.
So we have a recommendation moved by Councillor Piper, second by Councillor Vital. Any discussion on the bylaw? None being, I'll call the question. All in favor? Everybody in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to number 14. Is there any new business?
New business this evening. Thank you.
We'll move on to questions from the public pertaining to the agenda items only. We'll allow the people attending via Zoom to speak first, please.
Anybody on Zoom this evening would like to ask a question pertaining to the agenda? Thank you.
To all our Zoom participants, if you have a question, please use the raise hand feature. Your Worship, it looks like we have a question from Jan Perrin.
Yes, thank you very much, gentlemen. I don't know if you can see me. I do have my camera on and I put my question in the chat box, but I just wanted to say how nice it was to hear tonight of the council and the staff's concern for the trees on the proposed development at 510 Lillooet. And I was very pleased that there's several recommendations that must be met until there's any further reading of this bylaw. However, I must ask why at the end of last week, that property on about 450 Lillooet that also has a development permit approved for it was clear cut of every tree, including several mature ones, most of which were along the edges of the property where I don't think the building envelope would be built. So I just wondered why that had happened when the trees on this property on 510 Lillooet are now a subject of great discussion along with several other items which are also of much importance.
Yeah, my understanding was that the trees that were on the property were on their own property, not on the village boulevards. And there is going to be a new Lillooet and Esplanade. There's going to be new sidewalks there. On that.
Well, I was still very disappointed because the trees you're discussing tonight are also on some of that private property on 510 Lillooet. I just don't see the difference, and I just have to advocate for the trees in this time of climate emergency. They offer us so many eco services, everything from flood mitigation to providing us with shade. They offer us biodiversity. They improve people's mental health. They regulate water flow. They reduce carbon emissions. They increase property values. And I'm just reading from a UN document, Food Agriculture Organization of the United Nations document published in the last 5 years. And I just feel that we need to be a leader in development, in stewardship of our trees, and I think our development practices in this community should reflect 21st century development stewardship and practices, and I think we're still working in the 1970s. And I would really urge council in this time of climate change to protect every huge tree. We suffered devastating floods last year in this province. We suffered a heat dome that killed 500 people in this province. And yet in Harrison, trees are not important. You also discussed another development tonight down on the Hot Springs Road at 750, I believe it was, or I think it was 750. And that also is a forested lot. And thank goodness there's going to be an environmental assessment because you've got the Miami Slough at the back of that, which is also so important for climate mitigation. And I just hope that you'll start changing your development practices so they really reflect the kind of stewardship that is needed in the 21st century. There is no time to waste. There's no time to wait. And I'm hoping that you'll start looking at smart growth. You'll start looking at United Nations documents. You'll start looking at the Green Toolkit for Urban Forests. And all these documents have been available for the last 15 years. And I just don't see us following any of these practices in this community on the lower valley floor. And I just see over the 30 years I've been here, just the loss of our urban forest. So I'm urging you to look after what you've got left. And I also have to say thank you for the East Sector, because the East Sector is approximately 240 acres of forested land, but that has to be protected with everything you've got, because it's Crown land and it's under the regional district at the present time. But it's something that I have to say thank you for. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. And we are, the council is, I believe it's this week, is having a urban forest. Is it this week or next week? Oh, sorry, 23rd of this month, we're having an urban forest presentation. So the council is looking towards how we can deal with the urban forest situation in our community. And as you mentioned, it has been part of this council and previous councils since I came on board that the East Sector is protected. And as far as I'm sitting in the chair, the East Sector will be protected. I'm sure the councillors here today or previous councillors will protect that one of the last few remaining forests in the Fraser Valley, which we're very proud of. But thank you for your comments, Ms. Perrin. And we'll as we move forward, we try to do our best in regards to what has to be removed and what can stay. But thanks again for your comments. Is there any other questions from people on Zoom?
Doesn't look like there's any other questions, Your Worship.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. John Allen, 398 Hot Springs Road.
And please, sir, this is a question, not a statement, please. It's questions from the public. We don't need statements.
So are you going to cut me off now, or did I get to talk?
Excuse me, sir. I'm just asking you, it's questions from the public. Please ask a question.
I will ask a question.
I'm already getting feedback from our councillors in regards to the continuation of your statements before you get to the question.
Mr. Chairman,
your question is, sir?
You just listened to Jan Perrin for 10 minutes.
Your question is, sir?
Why would council approve a development permit for 798 Hot Springs Road, which is the twin brother of Terra Estates at 750, without ensuring that there is an adequate sidewalk in front of the property, which they appear to have failed to secure at 750, and without ensuring that the severe drainage problems in that area are addressed by securing both an easement through the property to the ditch at the foot of Agassiz Mountain, and either ownership or easement of the ditch itself, which is part of the upland of the Miami Slough. We know from Councillor Hooper's comments that council should know from experience that if you grant a development permit and don't insist on these things, you end up with disasters like Pine Avenue and the Breezes, where the village had the opportunity to get a wider road and a sidewalk and proper sight lines, but because you didn't insist on it at the development permit level, you let it slip, and now we have
an expensive problem that somebody's going to have to pay for down the road. Pine Avenue is a traffic disaster. And it's because the council did not insist at the development permit stage on those issues being addressed. So I'm asking 798 Hot Springs Road, which your planner says that the requirement for the tourist commercial development form this area, that it is not a tourist related project. When the Terra Estates was proposed, it was a tourist project. It was going to be little cabins and cottages for people to come and rent and spend time in Harrison. It has morphed into an extremely ugly, high density, tall building. And
your question,
therefore, if there's no form and character requirement for the tourism thing, there should be a form and character requirement for the residential development. And there isn't, it doesn't exist. On October the 15th, 2018, the developer came in here and applied for an exemption to the height limit so he could build the 3-story buildings. The council quite wisely said, no, you asked for cabins, they're going to be cabins. He's building the 3-story buildings anyway. How does that ever happen? How does that happen?
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Council does not have control.
The development permit that was carried out with the first portion was by a previous council. They had the designs of the homes, the roof lines, the square footage, I think was maximum 1,400 square feet. And it was either resort or permanent residential. That's what's on the development permit. Now, your reference to what you're saying to the other portion, the planner has already indicated tonight that there are several issues still to be discussed, from infrastructure to drainage, to do with that development at the appropriate time, and that's when it will be done. Thank you.
But Mr.
Any
Mayor,
other questions from the public this evening? Thank you, sir. Sit down.
across the street,
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen.
the Timbro townhouses, you didn't deal with drainage
Thank-
there either.
thank you,
Now we
sir.
have flooding all over the place.
Thank you very much.
Council needs to insist on it.
Questions from the public tonight? None being, a call for motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Palmer, second by Councillor Piper. All in favor? Opposed? Nobody? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.